Yo, 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 yo. Thank you, Nate, for that grounding, emotional, inspiring kickoff. And thanks everybody for having me. My name is Baratunde Thurston. I'm coming to you live and direct from Los Angeles, California, land of the Tongva people. And I'm feeling a lot of what we just heard. Uh, just because America's failing, we don't have to. Emotional safety, cutting down on syllables. I'm a fan of compression algorithms, so psychological to emotional. That's a good look. That's a good move, brother Nate. And I'm excited to jam with you in a few minutes. I'm gonna just share a little bit of my story and some thoughts on how we get to where we want to be, rather than focusing so much on what we've been suffering through. I do want to give a shout out to the pandemic for revealing deeper levels of truth. That the fact that we are not actually all on the same page, that a rising tide doesn't really lift all boats, and that nobody predicted that QR codes would actually be the thing that drives the most out of this thing that was supposed to bring us all together. That blew me away. So whoever came up with those, when I clowned QR codes in the early 2000s and then the early 2010s, I was wrong. And admitting when we're wrong is a key step to moving us all forward together. So bow down to the QR codes. It's a surprising and real thing. I'm the son of Arnita Lorraine Thurston and Arnold Robinson. I didn't know my father much. He was shot and killed in Washington, D.C., where I grew up, when I was 7, 8 years old. And so my mom had the exclusive rights to raising me. She was the daughter of two beautiful and challenged people. Her mother was the first Black employee inside the US Supreme Court. Her father was her tormentor and abuser, and her mother allowed that to happen. The people that brought them into this world, also DC natives. I'm like fourth generation Washington, DC. As I was told, my great grandfather, born at the tail end of slavery, technically passed the Emancipation Proclamation, but still under that system, taught himself to read and walked himself to Washington, D.C., where he helped design that city. On my father's side, we have his parents from Orangeburg, South Carolina, who came to D.C. not just for economic opportunity, but actual freedom because of the terrorism that they were facing on the land that her parents owned. My grandmother told me, a woman who I only met a few years ago, told me that I was asking her about how she got educated. I was asking her what her school experience was. And she said, yeah, well, we had some school, but then, harvest season come around, we have to gather the farm. And I was like, cool, cool. And then you went back to school, right? And she's like, well, not exactly. Then we had to bring in the harvest and farm from all the other white families in the area. This is in the 1930s. And I said, was this a summer jobs program? Was this some kind of externship situation, co-ops? No, no, no. So her dad owned their farm. She was one of 6 kids. And it was very rare for a Black dude to own land in South Carolina in the 1930s and not be like a sharecropper, an actual landowner. But a condition of that, he was seen as uppity. He was too big for his britches. And so for him to get credit extended by the stores on Main Street, all owned by white families, he had to offer up his children's free labor to work on their farms. And so my grandmother never graduated high school, barely junior high school. And yet and still, she came to the Washington, D.C. area, worked for the U.S. Information Agency. So I have a grandmother who was the first Black employee in the Supreme Court building on my mama's side. I have a grandmother who is working in the U.S. Information Agency on my father's side. I'm born and raised in Washington, D.C. myself, descendant from slaves. There's no way to be more American than that. You can't be more American than being owned by America. And the past few years have revealed a lot of mythology, some of it positive, most of it distracting from the real experience that we go through, or how much farther we have to go to get where we want to go. I got fed up, exhausted by the focus on the challenge, the focus on the problem. And so my solution was, as with anyone who wants to change the world, let's make a podcast. Let's talk about it. Let's get in the feed. Let's use RSS technology. And the framework that we brought to this is called How to Citizen. That's the title. And our premise is that citizen is a verb. And for me, it was kind of self-survival. How can I focus my attention on something that moves rather than just worrying about diagnosing the problems and the challenges? And my wife, Elizabeth, I'm about here ready to launch this show. And she's like, hey, wait, before you start preaching all this stuff, what do you believe? What does the show believe in terms of citizen as a verb? Catchy idea. What's the structure underneath of it that's going to hold it all together? And so collectively, we and our early guests came up with these 4 principles of how to citizen. To citizen, number 1 is to show up and participate, right? You're here right now. You're showing up and participating. It's not always pretty. It doesn't always feel good, but just being in the room. And it doesn't mean you have to lead the room. It just means you can be in the room. And there's an assumption of action, participation, and presence, which a lot of our system denies us and says somebody else should be doing this. Number 2, the citizen is to invest in relationships with yourself, with others, and with the planet around you. We can't citizen alone, even though the economics and technologies of our time insist that we are alone, that we have to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and work twice as hard to get half as far, and all these things which make us think that it's on us alone to figure out our collective problems. That is a logical fallacy if you just see it that way. The planet is a part of us, and we are part of it. And so much of what we have set up is cut us off, not just from ourselves and other people, but from all other life. So we really have to reconcile that in the relationship concept here. Number 3, to citizen is to understand power, which is simply the ability to get somebody else to do what you want them to do. That's what Eric Liu of Citizen University taught us. And power comes with money. It comes with physical presence and force. It comes with showing up and participating. It comes with moving and sharing ideas. It comes with attention. Whatever we put our attention on, we give power to. And number 4 of 4, to citizen is to use all these things to benefit the collective self, not just the individual self. Valerie Kaur, who we set off this journey with as our first guest, wrote a book that you must read called See No Stranger. Basic premise is that a stranger is a part of myself I do not yet know. And in our very consumer-oriented society, hello, advertising and marketing humans, we are trained to feel that collective is a threat to the self. I contend there are many selves. We do have individual selves. We are also part of a greater whole, and thus we have a collective self. And the more we can recognize that we are part of something greater, 1, much more emotional safety. It just feels better. Parties are funner with people. I don't mind dancing alone, but I prefer to do it with others. I don't mind eating alone, but I prefer to do it with others. And I can't citizen alone. The only way to do it is with others. And so we require multiple mindset shifts to get us out of the habits and practices that we have been seduced into, sometimes not just seduced, sometimes pressed into against our will, that make us feel that if we think about others, we're denying something of ourselves, when in fact the opposite is quite true. When we think about others, we are enriching ourselves. My mother was my hero. I'm so glad you shared the story of your relationship with your mom, Nate. I think I'll share a quick version of my own before we start talking. My mom was born in 1940. She became a computer programmer for the U.S. government, never having graduated college. I attended night schools with her as a child at the local community college just outside of D.C. I saw her have to train her younger, maler, whiter counterparts to do her job so that they could get promoted and compensated above and beyond her. I saw her deal with the toxic workplace. I pulled her boots off at the end of the day. I saw her force herself to go to my PTA meetings, even on a sprained ankle, and feel bad because she couldn't make it. And everything I've been able to do, internal and external, book writing, media making, loving myself, is due so much to the contributions of this heroic figure in my life. During COVID, I had time alone, though. I had time off the planes, though. And what I felt was some uncomfortableness because I saw parts of myself I didn't love. I saw habits that I had developed which are impeding my relationship with my life partner and with myself. And as I started walking the road back to where those came from, they came from this saintly figure that I had immortalized in my book, How to Be Black. That's an awkward moment. I put you in print, lady. Furthermore, she had the nerve to die in 2005 at age 65 of colon cancer. So I am left to put these pieces together on my own. And I was mad. I was mad at the things she didn't teach me. I was mad at the bar that she set, which felt a little too high for someone, a little too small at the time. And it hurt. And I worked through it and landed on a very simple, obvious conclusion, but not obvious until I was like 43 years old, that my mother was a human being. And that I thought celebrating and loving her meant holding her as perfect, praising, appreciating, being grateful for all the things she did for me, and then telling everybody how great she is. While I was doing that, I was denying the fullness of who she really was, which was a fallible, partially broken person who couldn't teach me things she had never been taught herself. And when I developed empathy for that, I actually knew her better and could love her more. When I developed empathy for that, I could know myself better and love myself more. And it gave me literally more room to breathe. And I was learning more about my deceased mother long after she's gone and adapting my relationship to her, moved through anger, moved through shame, found deeper knowledge of self and her, and deeper love of self and her. That was magic and painful and weird and awkward. But to love is to know. And if we're unwilling to know, we're unable to love. It's true in every interpersonal relationship. If we inventoried ourselves and think about our siblings and think about our partners, you know something about them they don't want the world to know. And maybe because you know it, you love them more. So let's do that with our society. Let's have that kind of love for our country. Let us embrace the shadow truths and the embarrassing truths, along with the ones we celebrate on the banners and the plaques and the flag wavings and the rallies. Because if we only love our country for the beautiful stories and the way it makes us feel about us in a positive light, that's not really love. That's exploitation. That's usage. There's 3 or 4 things that I have in mind when I think about a group of folks in the advertising industry who are trying to help us move forward and struggling themselves. And the first is, I feel that too. I am not here as a saint or a prophet or an all-knowing lecturer on this is what you got to do, because I lived through it. I fail. I didn't predict the QR codes, and I didn't really know how to love my mother till she was dead. Let's acknowledge the things we don't know. It makes space for all of us to learn together. That the journey of inclusion, diversity, equity, justice, belonging, and whatever other letters they're going to add to that is not about my liberation. It's not about helping the downtrodden, the marginalized, the dispossessed, the underrepresented, so they can get a little taste of freedom. I grew up knowing more truth about this country than most people with higher forms of education than me. I've been free. Living inside a lie is living inside a prison and is the opposite of freedom. So as we think about this work, I shed the charity mindset. Shed the idea that you're doing this to help somebody else. You're doing this to help yourself individually and collectively. When I think about this advertising world and think about the second pillar of investing in relationships, I need us to change our relationship with technology, which this industry has been using to slice and dice us, to rank and rate us, to partition us into tiny little pieces and literally auction off our behaviors, our preferences, our social networks, our relationships to the highest bidder. As a descendant of people who were literally auctioned, I do not appreciate that. And we should not build a storytelling commercial enterprise on selling human anything. Stop that. Finally, second to finally, let's recognize that the planet is us and we are the planet. Let's use our powers to get right by that relationship. None of this exists or matters if we can't all breathe. The great news to me is that everything is pretty much a story, that most of the things we take as true are not things we directly experience. It's something somebody told us. It's something we saw or heard from a distance. Money's not real. United States of America is not real. Your brand ain't real. It's a collective delusion that we all co-sign up. We all co-sign on. And we can delude better. I want us to imagine better shit. Right? Like that's the opportunity here isn't to embrace a shameful exercise of self-flagellation and guilt. The opportunity here is to write a better story and then live that better story. Create one that's so much bigger than the small one we were all handed. None of us created this version, but we've inherited it and perpetuated it in many acts. So let's pause that. Let's go to that whiteboard and write some new shit. All right, I'll stop there. What's up, Nate? Come on back in. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Damn, dude. That hit home in so many different ways. Thank you so much, man.
And I apologize for the timing. I was trying to keep
no apologies necessary. No apologies necessary. We have some questions flooding in. I'm gonna pop off with the first one. I may have some of my own selfishly. Lola Bakari asked, how would you define responsible marketing?
Okay. Consensual, transparent are the first words that occur to me. And aligned is the third. So what you're selling and the story you're promoting has to be true internally. You can't market a product that isn't doing what you say it is, but more importantly, or as importantly, the process by which that product gets created has to also align with the story you're telling. So if you're promising a story of community and collaboration, but your business is run top down, more authoritarian manner, that's a lie. And it's not, it doesn't stop at it being a lie, but it's an opportunity, right? When you can do on the outside what you're doing on the inside and vice versa, we feel it. Why do we get upset when we find out that our heroic brands have been exploiting child labor? Because we expect better, because they've been teaching us to expect better, because they've been promising us better, but doing worse themselves. So the phrase that she used, remind me, Nate.
Responsible marketing.
Responsible. Marketing is power, must be wielded responsibly. And I think there's almost one extra level to this, which is I'm really key on this term regeneration, regenerative agriculture, regenerative finance, and how do we add more than we subtract to the communities around us. That can be financial, that could be narrative, that could be ecologically speaking, that could be literally carbon. But can your marketing do more than sell your shit? Can it actually empower the communities you're trying to be in relationship with? Can you even really embrace the idea of being in a relationship as opposed to very successful transactions with? So elevating the art of marketing to one that contributes more than it extracts, that is a profound, I think, opportunity, and can lead to a bunch of brainstorms of a different sort and a bunch of campaigns of a different sort that will hit differently and feel differently.
Beautiful, dude. All right, we got another one. My man's Julian Golferini, stuff from New York. I see you, Jules. He says, speaking of imagining new stuff, can you ask about his vision for the use of technology in advertising going forward as it relates to like media buying? You nailed it earlier, Baratunde, but what is a vision of a world where we better use technology? to support advertising?
Yeah, that's a very good, thoughtful question. I will not do it justice in the answer right now. Just a warning. I'm lowering expectations like Herschel Walk. I know. We just completed that. And now I brought us back a few days to one of the more embarrassing moments of a very embarrassing history. This great land of ours. What's a vision of how we can use technology in marketing and advertising that's different and that's better? That's, to my earlier point, not just criticizing the ad tech nonsense. I would love for brands to align themselves with technological products or processes that that are themselves more responsible. There's a group called New Public. They are imagining how we can build digital public spaces, taking lessons from sociology, from urban planning, to create that emotional safety that you were talking about, Nate, and design from the start differently. It means not going all in on the VC-backed design. Like, they all have the same end goal, which is scale and up and to the right, but the human experience isn't about that. Like, when I think about the most meaningful moments in my life, they weren't like the most or the fastest. They were sometimes the slowest and the smallest. And we can build technologies that encourage that. So I check out New Public specifically and just support that work, because marketing and advertising have been the financial fuel that has lit the fire of so much of the damaging technology we all experience. We made an early deal that we have to pay for all this with ads and surveillance. So there is a bridge to the first question of, like, responsible marketing is also embracing a responsible use of technology in the marketing. And one way is to financially support better, different, more citizen-oriented technologies. I can imagine a brand in the current season of How to Citizen. We are focused on experiments and examples of people practicing democracy differently. One example is citizen assemblies, and they're popping off all over the world. They're very direct. They draw people by lottery, almost like a jury, but it's not just to judge a possible crime. It's to come up with policy. And you see hints of it in participatory budgeting. I'd love companies to try to be involved in that, not to co-opt it, but you could just show up. You could just send a big muckety muck from your company to the local mutual aid meeting or the local citizens assembly. Shut up, right? But just be there. That would send a powerful message that it's not about your message, but you've taken the time, and it's such a level of respect. It's attending somebody's, event out of respect. I go to my friend's party or a friend of a friend's because I love my friend. It's important to them. I'm going to be there. I don't need to run the party. It's not my party, but me being there is so. Think about humble ways to use technology, support ones that respect our humanity a little bit differently. And I just need to cut myself off because it's such a great question, and I will probably think of more things later and like post them to Mastodon.
Thank you so much, Baratunde. I love that last beat. I want to emphasize on the fact that just showing up on a local level to decenter yourself and just be present just shows so much respect to a community that you are literally sucking the life and the economic exploitation from. Like, it's incredibly such a valuable point, and I just love it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, man.
And thank you for your time. We are going to be moving on to our next session. We'll be in touch. Thank you so much, and I hope you're all ready to rock.